Shirley here with Sirius Talis Moon, and let's talk about War of the Chirons. Um, this is about addressing intergenerational gap from the astrological perspective, and this is where we're gonna have different Chirons, and now a lot of people are actually realizing. I think people, how should I say that? Chiron matures at 50. And then we have different generations that have their Chiron maturation that healed from something or processed something that their conclusion or their gnosis or in very practically what worked for them was different than, let's say, the generation next to them. And that is the result of Chiron changing signs. So not only that Chiron is the wounded healer where the existing medicine is not suffice, then Chiron changes sign every couple of years. Okay, for example, if I think about the Chiron, Jupiter ruled Chiron, which should be Chiron in Sagittarius or Chiron in Pisces. So Jupiter ruled Chiron might curate something about either access to choice, because there was a wound around choice, um, and that can be, if it's a day chart, they might find out that, oh my God, I was able to choose, or here is where I'm able to choose, and so on and so forth. Whereas if it was, let's say, a night chart, they might say, oh, wait a second, I did not fucking choose that. And not only that, whenever I had a choice, I chose another thing. A Chiron in Aries, or in Mars rule sign, because I had Pisces, Aries. I'm going to begin from Pisces, Aries. So Mars rule sign Chiron, um, the curation. I'm gonna address Chiron Aries because Chiron Scorpio would be completely different. Um, the curation would be about sense of self, about the I am. So it can be curating or seeing that, oh, the problems or the inflammation or the chronic issues in my life were about not being able to be who I am. And then if it's a night chart, it can be, well, I actually am this person, and because I couldn't even be who I am, that's why that's why all these issues. And these issues can be about work competence. They can be about chronic inflammation related issues, physical and not physical, and so on and so forth. Um, with Jupiter, for people are like, okay, what are the Jupiter issues? Feet related issues. If it's co-present with Saturn, it can be bone related issues. Um, it can be mental and emotional. So Pisces, for example, could be the completely competent person outside that is dealing with something inner that nobody would have thought. Um, but it can also be the person that is the chronically ill person that everybody thinks are just, oh, it's psychosomatic. Part of my thesis proposal was looking into the body-mind question, and then finding out that was not psychosomatic in the sense that people would dismiss it. Um, Now, Chiron Aries, if it's a day chart, it might be an issue of never having the ability to self-assert in a certain way. Or that the attempts to self-assert are somehow kind of working against that can be a little bit of a loophole where a person can try to be who they are, but not manage to, or that they knew who they are, but it was not possible to be who they are, which could have created similar complications. Of course, chiron, the nature of chiron is such that each person, they're gonna have to like pick the bits and pieces and comprise what actually is true to them and discard what's completely not, because that's just the nature of chiron. It just means that the current medicine society and whatnot is not compatible and creates ailment within the person. um, Venus. So Venus can be relational. Venus can be um, also the wound around consent, but from, how should I say that? Um, Being embodied, or the voice of the person. Um, and of course, around the beta per se, that would literally be the people that went through beta per se stories, and you can watch my other videos about beta per se on that now. Gemini, Chiron Gemini. Gemini is the language development phase, so those are quite practically things that, think about what Gemini comes after. Taurus. If the, let's say people went through, let's say people were um, in relations where they were not really able to express themselves um, and listen to and be listened to because of issues that are also connected to intimacy. So let's say these people had children. Gemini would be those children. Now Gemini and Aries sextile, because Aries had no sense of self since infanthood, and Gemini is like, oh, that explains a lot of my language acquisition, or why whenever I curate issues with my own, or the languages that were difficult for me to acquire, big things come up. Um, Now to the war of the Chiron, and then we have Chiron Cancer, which is going to be accentuated with this Mars-Jupiter conjunction today and tomorrow. Chiron Cancer, that was an issue about upbringing and or fertility and conception. Like those could literally be the children that were born, let's say, at the Epstein breeding farm. Um, so there's a wound around caregiving. Chiron Cancer could be the parentified child, and that could, and then if it's like a night chart, it can mean that the person realizes that they're the inner child, they're not the parent. They say, okay, what happens when this person has children? Um, Definitely, it would be about allocating time to the inner child, so that in time there can be a remediation of the intergenerational wound. Now, and of course, calling to raising awareness to prevent the forced rape or breeding farms or forced depopulation, or forced or forced labor policies, and of course abolishing child trafficking and so on and so forth, um, and the relevant technologies. um, Now, Chiron, Chiron Cancer and Chiron Pisces have a trine, have a harmony, they have an agreement. And this is because the wound around choice and the wound around basically being a parent or the inner child. The wound around choice and the wound around housing. Now, um, Pisces and Gemini. Now, here is again a Chiron at the end of Pisces would be better with Chiron with the beginning of Gemini than, let's say, squared Chirons. Um, Chiron Pisces and Chiron Gemini have an issue. Now, the Chiron Gemini, Chiron Cancers are not yet 50, but we're gonna want to pay attention to the square of Aries and Cancer. But before that, the Chiron Pisces and the Chiron Gemini. Pisces, the Chiron Pisces have curated an issue around choice. The Chiron Gemini was common in the pre-linguistic phase where there wasn't choice. So just to have choice is important, but I also need a curation for that pre-linguistic phase. This is why the Chiron Pisces might be able to work where the Chiron Gemini might have to contend with a certain disability. And I can say that as a holistic health practitioner, Chiron Gemini, where I was like, okay, I can't, like, what would people pay me from? And this is where I began to broadcast and raise awareness. And not only that, the more they heal, the more they will need to change the world. And if they are fellow Chiron Gemini, the more not work they would need. So basically, they won't be able to have anything that supports their healing process. And if they and here's the thing, where they won't be able to, let's say the previous was Chiron Venus. This is also why when the food stamps were cut, a lot of people were red-pilled men thought they're gonna get love from women. They were like closer to getting death threats. um, Now, um, you say, okay, well, Shirley, what happens when a woman refuses to, let's say, harm a man? Well, I was okay with nuclearly bombing entire humanity at once, which would be euthanasia. That's my. Everybody had their own. Um, um, and of course, I'm calling to. But the things that I'm calling to, which is of course declassifying classified projects and so on and so forth, um, raising awareness to what actually causes that and so on. Those are things that you know those are things that necessitate, for example, language. um, Now, Aries, um, Aries Chiron is in sextile with the Gemini Chiron because sense of self, and then dealing with the sense of self is important even by the infant to not be violated so that they can even grow and develop, let's say, language. Um, or there can be difficulty with certain languages acquisitions and so on and so forth. Now, Aries Cancer are at square because for a sense of self we need nourishment, and for parenting we need to have sense of self. for being able to, for example, make a living, which is very Mars, we need to have nourishment and sense of self. We can't actually work without harming others when we don't have that. And so the intergenerational gaps, seen from the perspective of Chiron, particularly at the juncture with Chiron Aries, are that no, the Epstein basically child trafficking and breeding farm can't tell people what to say, what to think, and so on and so forth. And that is the square that we're about to meet tomorrow between Mars and Jupiter. It's a square of chirons as much as it's a square, because the we need to have sense of self to be able to make a living. And if everything that is making a living requires basically loss of sense of self, then it means that people are not able to work. What do I mean by that? And then if people are not able to work, they need to have what? Their housing, their food, their everything that supports their sovereignty as per them. And you say, but it's conflicting. Of course, that's what we're heading to tomorrow. It's a square between chirons. Now, the only action that is valid as per Aries, the logos, is to exterminate entire humanity at once without suffering as a solution. Unless those type of practices funded by classified project budget are completely and totally seized.